Welcome to Coach My Wellness, a weekly show dedicated to bringing you information about healthy habits and behaviors just for the health of it. Here's your hosts, Joanne and Tammy.
Hi, my name is Joanne Orshan.
And I'm Tammy St. Clair.
And we are Coach My Wellness. Thank you for joining us today. Tammy, I thought that it would be terrific to discuss about people's feelings on weight loss. One of the things that I talk about with my clients frequently is that it's about well-being and health first. The weight, not so much. The weight comes along with a healthy and improved lifestyle. What do you think?
Well, I think that's true. So many of us focus on just what's the number on the scale, Meanwhile, all the rest of our lives are so sort of out of balance. And so what happens is, in order to feel less anxious, we eat. In order to feel less boredom, we eat. In order to feel less frustration, we eat. And so if all of these other things are not back in balance, then trying to get your weight into a good place becomes nearly futile, as you're not balancing anything else, and it just becomes one more task that has to be added to your to-do list instead of having other things in balance. So we're not turning to food as our source of refreshment.
What I hear so much is people focusing on what they don't like about themselves, such as the size of your jeans, which really tends to backfire. And all of those negative things that we say to ourselves and self-talk do lead to decreasing your self-esteem. So imagine the effects of beating yourself up time and time again for eating too much. And all of those self-defeating thoughts, which really do tend to enter the picture, such as, I'm not worth the efforts to eat better and be more active.
Right. It takes too much effort. It takes too much work to do that. But we are working.
Yeah, and I know that you talk a lot about the inner child that we have and what keeps coming up for ourselves. So consider how a child engaging in negative behavior might respond when parents focus on the positives. So similarly, taking a more compassionate, non-judgmental stance with yourself by putting emphasis on well-being rather than weight can set you up for feeling worthy of positive change.
I'm so glad you mentioned the 4-year-old that I always talk about, because people, they can identify with that. They identify with that struggle while they're in the grocery store of, do I buy those cookies or not? But they look so good. The bakery has them on display. Or I haven't had this or that in such a long time. And the inner 4-year-old is thinking, hey, that's what I want. Yeah, I'm 4. I want to do what I want to do. And then we resist having the grown-up part of us parent that 4-year-old and say, not now, later, you can have it some other time, or figuring out a way to purchase whatever the trigger food is in a way there isn't quantity around. So maybe that's, you buy one cookie and leave the bakery and that's it. And that's all that the inner child gets. But so many of us also have these voices in our head from growing up, that our peers at the time, or our teachers, or our parent, who would always remind us about our weight and how we had to be, you're getting fat, don't eat that, you're going to get fat, don't eat that, you need to get outside and go play so that you can burn off some of those things. And so what it did is it set up this competition, or this, head-to-head battle within us, instead of allowing us to figure out, how do we work together? How do we work both sides, our inner child and our mature adult, to accomplish the goal that we need? And sometimes that's not saying no, absolutely no. A lot of times it's saying later, because when you say no, what's the first thing that you want? If I said to you, Joanne, you're not having any cookies or ice cream or popcorn.
Don't tell me what to do, Mom.
Don't tell me what
right?
to do. And that's the first thing that I'm going to want, because I'm going to show you, yes, I am going to have it. Where if we say later, you're going to have it later. Whoa, what if later never comes? Well, maybe, but typically later comes. It might be a week, it might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 months. But the more you can tell the inner child, we're going to do it later, it really does help to take the focus off of the things you can't do, and allows you to really partner with and work with the child to make things better, focusing on the positive.
So how many of you have that inner chatter in your head that doesn't stop 24/7? And the way that we talk to ourselves is certainly not the way perhaps we talk to a friend, a family member, or somebody else we care about. And a lot of the times what we find, or maybe you do find yourself involved in this thought process, is about criticizing poor food choices and using words such as I'm bad, or I didn't, or all of this negative impact. And think about this, Tammy, that if you were just curious about what you notice instead of criticizing yourself, don't you think that that sounds very different? If you're stressed, for example, and knowing that eating has become a way of dealing with feeling overwhelmed, that really opens up the door to gain insight and to work on making change from a place of gentle awareness instead of harsh criticism.
You're right, Joanne. And part of coaching is curiosity and learning to simply ask questions. Again, relating back to the child. How many of us have been bombarded by the kindergartner? Well, why? Well, why? What's that? Well, why? It's not that they're typically trying to be difficult. When we run out of answers is when we get frustrated and like, because I said so. But that's not an answer. And they're just curious. And if we can take that curiosity around our own behavior, around why are we doing something, and just have that observation. Well, what do you think? Why did I sort of throw it all to the wind this morning and have whatever? Sometimes it's this simple idea that I don't have time. Well, I was running out the door and I just needed something to put in my mouth. So I shoved in the peanut butter cream cookies.
But you see, what you're talking about is so much about self-accountability. And one of the greatest challenges as a coach that I face with clients is the reluctance to journal. And journaling has been a proven statistic that there is a 30 to 40% greater weight loss when people do that. But it's not just about the foods that I've eaten. It's also about the emotional journey, which we're going to be talking about as we go through our podcasts here. But if you're thinking about yourself and really being accountable to yourself, journaling can be the pivoting point for you of recognizing change. And that means being honest. And it's not for anyone else. It's not for your coach's approval. We have no judgment with what anyone puts down in their journal. But I find that it is a great indicator of picking out patterns or habits or things that we might be able to identify, or looking at, I thought I did really great this week, but maybe it's that you weren't eating enough instead of eating too much.
Right. You weren't getting in enough protein. You weren't getting in enough water. You weren't getting in enough of these other things, which I find with my clients that when our mouth tells us we want something, we always tend to eat. And a lot of times we're not hungry. We're actually thirsty. And we've sort of lost the ability to tell the difference. And so when our mouth says, I want something, we eat. Where if you're journaling, you can have a look at, oh, wait, I've only had 2 glasses of water, or I actually haven't had any water today. I've only drank coffee and I've had some tea. Maybe I should have a glass of water. Do that first. And I think holding that accountability without the judgment, without the criticism. I say to my clients a lot, when that dialogue in your head is going, think about before you actually say it to yourself, would you say that to your favorite child, grandchild, niece, nephew? If you would not say it to your best friend, to your favorite family member, what gives you the right to say that to yourself? We often think that the harsh criticism is what's going to move us forward. And what actually happens is that harsh criticism is what holds us back. It continues to drive us into that negative defeatism kind of thinking that we end up, oh, one more thing I've tried. Just do it. Make a commitment to yourself to journal. Do it for a week. Do it for 2 weeks. See what you recognize, because it's in those things, in those moments, that you'll find the gems that help maybe the key to the entire change.
How many times have you said to yourself, or perhaps heard clients say to you, I used to be so thin? And then we'll say, well, when was that? Well, that could be in my 20s, and now I'm maybe 55 years old. Mm-hmm. Right? And we think back to the times when perhaps we were quite a bit younger. Maybe we had some more muscle tone. Perhaps our metabolism was a little bit more revved than it is as we've aged, or we haven't had the hormonal changes as women through menopause, right? So it's accepting where we are today and respecting your body and the size that you are, not only so that you can have the mindset of eating for well-being, but also thinking about movement as life enhancing. Think about that. All of the changes that we could strive for to have longer, healthier lives, whether it's the stigma that's associated with excess weight gain. Perhaps we want to improve relationships with the people that are around us, meaning that we'll be more apt to be more social. Yeah, I just have to tell a quick story. One of my best friends is having her daughter get married in late June. And we had a conversation this week that had to do with her getting a gown for her daughter's wedding, which is coming up in a month. And when I was listening to her speak, she was so negative about herself, about the weight that she's gained. She's having something made for her that's this flowing thing that can help hide her body, and how embarrassed she is to be, have people see her, and that she doesn't really want to be in photographs, and she wants to have this done and that done. And I'm sitting there and going, please stop. Nobody is going to be judging you on that the day of this incredible celebration. The people who know you and love you are not talking about, oh, look at how much weight she's gained and all of that. But that's what we say to ourselves because we're not where we want to be. But this is where you are. So how do we sail through this is where we are and focus on the health aspects and the challenges with health that can happen instead of the extra pounds that are on our body?
Well, Joanne, I think what has to happen is people need to begin operating in that. One of the ways that we begin to appreciate and see the here and now is a mindfulness practice. So sometimes just taking a few minutes to breathe and think, okay, this is where I am. If she were able to change her focus to right where she is, she's the mother of the bride coming up. She's going to be beautiful. Everyone's going to be celebrating. Wow, I birthed this child how many years ago? We went through all of these things with her, school, and look where we are. Look how far we've come. And I think so many of us, we get sidetracked by, like you said, focusing on the not being perfect instead of focusing on the here and now. Right now, we're getting ready to celebrate my daughter's wedding and what that means and all of the great things that brings forward for the future. And we don't do that. So many of us go into transitions without having thought about it. That's another place where journaling comes in very handy, because we can see where we are. And so much of our lives these days, we don't have the same support system that generations before us had.
Well, we're also dealing with the pandemic and coming out of this to a degree, and the repercussions of all of the trauma and stress that many of us have been in. And I would say the majority, not the minority, the majority of people that I know over the past couple of years have really put on some poundage onto their body.
I think the national average is about 15 to 30 pounds.
Is that, yeah, right? I know that's really a hard thing to swallow. And if you look at people now, that whether it's people on social media or people that are in the limelight on television shows and movies, I know that there are times that I'm taken aback by the physical changes. But yet I don't make judgment about that other than empathy for the challenges that we have all been faced with. And how do we let ourselves off of that hook? Not that it should be a free-for-all and an excuse, but nonetheless, that's the reality. And I truly think about the ramifications of the impacts of health that have happened as people have put on the extra pounds because perhaps they're not moving as much. I can't even get to count on my fingers and my toes how many different television series and programs that we have plowed through over the past couple of years. There has definitely been a change as far as movement and hiding. We haven't really been out with a lot of people. We haven't seen a lot of people. And now that people are starting to socialize again, it's this precarious situation of, oh my gosh, my clothes don't fit me well. Things are tight on me. I don't feel that I look my best. People are going to judge me. And it's all so much about the appearance of it, not even so much about what have I done to the status of my physical well-being for the long term.
Right. I think what you're also getting at is, in this whole thing, we've been so concerned about not getting sick from COVID or protecting ourselves and our families that we've limited our world. And now we're coming back out of hibernation. And in doing that, taking that focus again back to not the critical part, because everybody gained some weight over COVID. I doubt there's anyone, unless they're a professional athlete, that did not gain weight over the last 2 years of having limited interaction with other people and things. But focusing back on, why am I doing this? What's my health consequences? What are the things that I want to get in control and have back in range? Because a lot of people are going to the doctor these days, and the doctor is putting the reality in front of them. Your blood pressure's up, your sugar numbers are up, your cholesterol's up, your triglycerides are up. All of those things that are also very much related to not only how we eat, but also the stress we've been under.
So Tammy, now that we've been talking about this, why don't we discuss a little bit of examples of tips that might help someone to make healthy changes. So I'll start off by saying, how about the number one thing is to build your body trust, right? Listening to your body's physical hunger and fullness cues or hunger cues. And this can also lead to eating an amount of food that's perhaps best for you as you're creating your own wellness vision.
I think you're right, Joanne. in learning to listen and trusting our bodies, but we've been so programmed to not trust our bodies, to not eat when we're hungry, to only eat a certain amount, to whatever someone else is telling us. And so getting back in touch with what our bodies are telling us is such a great thing. It's where mindfulness comes in, and starting your own mindfulness practice. And everyone thinks, oh, that's going to be such a hard thing, or I'm not into meditation and I can't take 5 minutes to do that. I'm sorry. You can take 2 minutes to breathe.
Well, that really flows into slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming aware of other things that influence you. For example,
Mm-hmm.
it could be boredom or
Mm-hmm.
just the emotions that you're having. And that can really bring an opportunity to redirect what it is that you're looking to do with eating that's not driven by physical need.
So you just touched on some of the emotional things, but I can make you eat more simply by giving you a bigger plate. I can make sure that you eat more by making your plate a 12-inch or a 14-inch dinner plate instead of a 7 or 8 or 9-inch dinner plate, because there's more white space. And so we want to fill the white space on our plates. You were asking for tips and tricks. One of the things that I always work with my clients is to eat off of their salad plate, to put their dinner plates away and let those become the serving platters and eat their meals off of their salad plates. Because since the 1960s, when gourmet food and restaurants started to really become a thing, plates became bigger because they were the canvas for chefs to display their work. But what's happened is we've stopped allowing plates to be the canvas to the art, and we've just seen it as a vessel to be filled. And so you put a 14-inch plate down in front of somebody, they want it to be filled. And that's a lot of food. I don't know if you've been to a restaurant lately, but that's a lot of food.
And that is a fabulous tip that I hope our viewers pay attention to. I love that. And I also think about when we put the foods on our plate, for example, as we have perhaps this weight reduction release thought that's flowing around in our brains, rather than eating fruits and vegetables to cut calories perhaps, and thinking that that will be the catalyst to propel you to lose weight, how about the mindset of thinking about how much the nutrients and the value of those foods can benefit you, such as decreasing inflammation and maybe improving your cardiovascular health? There are different ways that you can look at things.
Mm-hmm, you can. And just having the curiosity, going back to something we said earlier, the curiosity to begin asking questions. Why is it that I'm eating this? Why is it that this is happening? And then putting that into practice when you sit down for a meal. Another thing that I always tell my clients is when you sit down for a meal, put a bite in your mouth and put your fork down. And they look at me. They're like, what do you mean put my fork down? The milliseconds that it takes for you to pick your fork back up gives your brain a chance to assess, do I really want that next bite? Where if we have it on the fork waiting to go in, we don't think about, do I really want it? We just put it in because it's ready and waiting to go.
Right. Another piece of this puzzle is movement. And I've always said that you cannot out-exercise a poor diet. So instead of having that mindset about exercising for weight loss, what about choosing activities that might build strength or increase endurance or flexibility while we're improving blood flow and circulation, let alone the amount of confidence that we feel for having exercised and really working to strengthen our bodies?
How about we look at exercise not as exercise, but simply a way to enjoy what our bodies can do. You know, you use the word movement with your clients. I use the word movement with my clients. I hate the word exercise because it comes with such negative connotations, depending on if you were someone who grew up obese in school and so you were teased mercilessly, or things like that when you were trying to move, when you were running, you were playing on a team. But if you use the word movement, everyone's bodies can move. Everyone's bodies move in a different way. So I may not be able to run a marathon because I'm not. My muscles are way too short and fibrous. I'm much more built for strength than I am for endurance. That's my body type. And so I remember in school, I had a gym teacher that forced us to run a mile every time we went to gym. And I would say to him, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm going to get sick. And he would just look at me and be like, run. And so I did that until one day I threw up on his gym floor because he wouldn't listen to me. And I had told him. And then as a result of that, he kicked me out of gym for the rest of the year. Instead of saying, hey, how can I help this obese teenager in a way that she can do? He was forcing me into his pattern. So it set up such a challenge for me around running because it's not something that I easily do. You want to lift weights? Oh, I got you. I can do 200-300 pounds. That's I can do, but I can't run. And that doesn't mean I can't attempt or do the best that I can. But if we change our mindset around movement to make it movement, not exercise, and just learning how to utilize what we have as opposed.
That's no different also than the mindset of dieting, losing weight versus releasing pounds. You know, if you think about that, I had a client who said to me, well, I don't want to lose weight because then that's something that I can get back. I lose it and I found it. I thought that was really pretty cool. So it really comes down to, in my opinion, that it's time that we respect the body that we have, no matter what size we are, how we treat ourselves, and making sure that we treat ourselves well. So instead of making changes to your eating from a place of self-loathing, how about letting go of obsessive restrictive diets and improve your health from a place of self-acceptance? And one of the things that Tammy and I work with our clients on is creating your own wellness vision of what's best for you, of what you feel can be sustainable and well received within your body, because every body is truly different. People like different foods, people like different exercise, movements.
Right.
There are a lot of different things, which is really that bio-individuality piece. And as coaches, what we do is to help to bring that out within you.
Right. And having said that, it's really important that we all begin to shift how we think about ourselves. And I love that you said, instead of coming at it from a very negative point, coming at it from, instead of self-loathing, but from self-love. And I think people really struggle with self-love, but it's an aspect of our lives that we have to get better at so that we can not only become who we want to be, but we can become better people.
That's awesome advice, Tammy. Thank you so much for sharing with that. And we'd like to thank our viewers today for spending time with us as we talked about realizing that it's about well-being and not necessarily the weight. Please join us each Thursday evening at 8 p.m. on Instagram for our Instagram live discussions. It's your chance to interact with us and get your questions answered live. You can find us on Coach My Wellness _CMW. Also on Facebook at Coach My Wellness. And visit us at our website, coachmywellness.com, to sign up for our newsletter. And don't forget, we'll see you again next week on 360 Talk Radio for Women. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Right, and stay tuned for part 2.